Stories from Foster Care is brought to you by the Irish Foster Care Association in association with the Department of Children, Disability and Equality.
Welcome to Stories from Foster Care. I'm Niamh Barrett, and this is the second part of my interview with Katie Wrench. Katie is a social worker, art psychotherapist and author. She and her family have also been respite foster carers.
Some of the experiences the children that we care for and work with have had are so unimaginable. They're so difficult. It's hard to get your head round. And as a caregiver, you need to have got your head round that if you are then going to be able to be available for co-regulation for your child. Whereas if you're still caught up in the emotional experience of it yourself, because it's really distressing, you can't be available for that child in the way that they're going to need, because your own needs might overwhelm you. That's normal, isn't it? We're all human beings at the end of the day.
Katie has so much experience to share that we decided to split our interview into two parts. So if you haven't heard the first part, we can recommend that you listen to that. In this episode, we talk about life story work, the BUS model. BUS stands for Building Underdeveloped Sensorimotor Systems, and Katie's insights into what is really needed in the field of foster care at this time. I caught up with Katie over Zoom, and there was the occasional Zoom bit of dropout, but we've kept those glitches to a minimum, and it shouldn't get in the way of you enjoying the conversation. For somebody who hasn't heard about life story work before, what would those basic elements be?
I'll give you the updated version, I guess, because we started off with a sort of 6-part model for practice. And over the last 10 years, I guess I've refined that a little. I've learned more. I've trained people much more. I've done much more work with children and families. And I've tried to refine it into what I think are 3 important steps. And when I was thinking before about what you suggested I think about, which was what do children in foster care need, it actually comes down to these 3 things, whether you're doing life story work or not, I think. The first is that we support children to feel safe enough to go back and explore difficult parts of their story. And by safe, I don't just mean, we're now in a safe foster family, because most children are in safe foster families. I'm thinking much more about that safety in their brains, their bodies and their relationships. So not just that they now are living in a safe context, but of course that's important. But we know, don't we, that often children continue to respond, or the brains and bodies still react in the here and now as if they're still living in a dangerous space where their needs aren't being met or where they can't trust grown-ups. So that to me feels like the fundamental thing we should be doing for any child who's experienced disruption to development and complex trauma. If we don't support them to feel safe in the here and now, to feel like they've got grown-ups available to them to help them feel better when they're overwhelmed. So the idea of, you need to have experiences of co-regulation before you can even begin to think about managing your own big feelings. That kind of stuff. Plus, I think, I've got more and more of a sense that, obviously, depending on a child's age and developmental stage, that it's really helpful to help them understand what impact having lived in a scary environment or unsafe environment or not having had your needs met, what effect that has on your brain and your body, because then you normalise some of those responses, don't you, rather than children thinking there's something wrong with them or not understanding why they might have a big reaction to a certain trigger. Let's help them understand that actually, that's quite normal when you've experienced something really upsetting or really traumatic. I'll often give examples of day-to-day ways in which we all do that. We all have responses to triggers in our environment where something scary has happened. I often give a very simple example, which is good few years ago now. I was driving home from work on the motorway, queuing to come off at my exit, big tailback, December, dark, miserable, rainy night. And I'm sat queuing to exit and in a big long queue of traffic, and big white van clearly didn't see the queue and smashed straight into the back of me. And then shunted me into the car in front, who got shunted into the car. It was horrible, really scary. And probably for months after that, because I couldn't avoid the exit, it was the exit to my house. And for months after that, if I was on that motorway and I got even just the slightest whip of a big white van in my mirrors, I would feel my body begin to have a physiological response to the stress, to the fear, because my brain is being reminded of something scary that's happened before and predicting that something scary is going to happen again. And as a grown-up, I can make sense of that. I can think, actually, Katie, it's all right. You know what's happening here. You're remembering that crash. It was very scary, but that's a different van. And you're okay. Take a breath. That will help calm your body down. Move over, move into another lane, get yourself out of the way, and just tell yourself you're safe. I can do that because I recognize the trigger. And I'm a grown-up who's got those resources to notice what's happening on a bodily level before I'm overwhelmed by it.
Yeah.
But kids don't always have that, do they? We don't always know what the triggers are. We don't always know the thing that's making them go straight into that defense response. That, to me, is the bottom line. That's the beginning of everything. The second part of the model and of life story work, but again, I think this applies just full stop, whether you're doing life story work or not, is about really trying to nurture for those children a sense of belonging, connectedness, and a sense of who they are, their identity. Because we know, don't we, that where kids have had loads of disruption to their relationships, to where they've lived, to life, to development, that their sense of self can often be just as fractured. You know, if you've lived with different families, you might have different rules in those different families, different routines, different cultural experiences, different food, different bedtime, but it's all different, isn't it? So, you know, knowing where you fit within that can be really tricky. But also, I think for some children, I think there's a bit of a sense that if all you know and understand about your birth family is everything that's gone wrong, well, what does that then say about you? So I'm always kind of interested in where are the threads of positive connection between a child and their birth parent or birth family, whether that's that, you know, all support the same football team, or you've got those beautiful blue eyes from your mummy, or your love of cooking from your dad who worked as a chef, or whatever it is. Where are those little threads of connectedness? But also then there's lots of research, isn't there now, about the idea that when we feel like we belong to a family, to a social group, to a team, to a school community, that has a really positive impact on self-esteem and is a really resilient quality. So I think lots of children, especially where they've had lots of moves and disruption, don't necessarily always feel that within the foster family that they live in or within that children's home. So it's about how do we then find ways to nurture that sense of connectedness and belonging in other settings that are adult-led, that are safe. Because if we don't do that, the risk is young people will go and find that somewhere else, and it's not always in the safest or most helpful places. Mm-hmm. I'll give you an example of a little boy I've worked with recently, an adopted little boy who was constantly being excluded from school, so didn't have that sense of belonging within his school community or friendships actually either, because he was really struggling with friendships. So out of school, not having that connectedness, out of a peer group, not feeling connected there or like he belonged, really struggling within his adoptive family, who also had a birth child, had very clearly said to them, I think I'm in the wrong family. I don't think I should have been matched with you. I don't think you're the right family for me. And I might have been happier somewhere else. He's only 9 at this point. Had had to leave, really loved football, had to leave football training because he couldn't manage waiting. He couldn't follow instructions. He couldn't be part of the team because he just wanted to follow his own agenda. You've got a little one who doesn't feel that sense of connectedness anywhere. Yeah. And is feeling completely adrift. And so, as well as sitting with his parents and thinking about how painful it is for everybody that he feels like that he feels like he isn't part of their family and he shouldn't be there. And so we sat with that for a bit, because that's important to acknowledge, isn't it? The feelings that engenders in everybody, and to normalise that and validate it, but also then to think about, so where can we help him get that? Where can we help him find that? And his dad found a skateboard club that was running in a local park that was led by some youngish men who had all had, I remember his dad saying he was really impressed because they'd all had mental health first aid training and should have a bit of an awareness of what his son's needs were. And so this dad found this place, met with the leaders, talked about his son, and took him week after week after week. And that was where he got a little sense of a part of something that he really, really needed in that moment. They were really supportive of him when he made a mistake. They scooped him up. There were bigger lads there who could help him learn just that sense of he's just accepted here was absolutely critical. And I think actually it was the beginnings of things starting to feel a little bit better. So that kind of thing, I guess, is also super important, isn't it? Yeah. And it doesn't matter where you get that. It can be at church. It can be in a sports team. It can be because you volunteer somewhere. It doesn't matter. But where do you feel like you've got some value and people are happy to see you and that you contribute something and you've got things that are in common with others, as well as having things that make you special. So that, I think, foster carers have such a massive role in that, don't they? Because it's a day-to-day thing, that, isn't it? It's not just I can do that with you for an hour a week in therapy. That's a lived experience kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the second bit. The third bit, I suppose, is about how we help children develop narrative coherence. So that's that sense of having an integrated version of your own story that makes sense, that has a clear chronology, that you've had chance to understand, that you've had chance to kind of understand the context to different things having happened in your life. So at the end of that bit of work, you have been able to talk about what you remember, but also somebody has supported you to fill in the gaps in what might be missing from your knowledge, or what you might have forgotten, or what you might not have a verbal memory of because you were too teeny at the time it happened. You might have been an infant or toddler, or even things that have happened in utero. Children don't have a verbal memory of those things that have happened, and yet their brains and bodies remember, don't they? So that kind of idea of just helping kids develop a coherent sense of their journey through time, and an integrated story. And by that, I mean that we give them space to think about, okay, so now you know this about yourself, or you know this about your family, something that maybe you've not heard before, but you've got that memory stored there somewhere deep down. What does that mean for you? How do you feel about it? Have you got any more questions? You give kids the opportunity to have a feeling about their story, but also to try to join the dots a bit. So I really want narratives that we try to support children to create, to help them understand, like cause and effect almost, really. So, okay, so this happened on that day, and that led to this decision being made by the social worker. And as a result, you moved to this family, and just so that you can see that clear story, really, and justifications for why decisions have been made in children's lives. And if we just give the information, or we don't, if we just leave kids with gaps, they will make up what they don't know, or they'll develop little fantasies, or they'll develop misunderstandings about why things have happened and who's responsible for them, often that blame themselves. So it's just so important that we create space for that, but not in isolation. If you just dive straight in with that without having a degree of confidence that children are well enough resourced to manage the feelings that are going to emerge about their story, and that their caregiving system around them is equally well resourced to manage what may emerge, we shouldn't be diving straight in with the information sharing bit. We should be thinking, actually, our priority is to help this child feel safe, to understand that the relationships they've got with grown-ups around them can be trusted, the world is a safe place, that they're not under threat in this moment.
This is really helpful, Katie, for how to approach it, and also kind of in what you're saying is how not to approach it as well. I mean, you're pointing to that, like not diving straight in and being able to allow the child to have the feelings that come up. It does kind of put it to us to be able to be with what comes up for us as well.
And one of the questions I'm always interested in when we're thinking about, is life story worker going to be a good fit for this child, is how's the carer feel about it? What's their view of the birth family? Can they think and talk about what's happened to their child without becoming overwhelmed by it themselves? Are parts of that child's story triggering for the carer? And if so, then we need to help them with that. My experience, certainly in social work and in therapy is that many of us end up doing this kind of a job because we've got stories of our own. And I imagine that for some foster carers, it's the same. You know, something leads us in this direction, doesn't it? And so it's inevitable, therefore, that some kids' stories will trigger us more than others. And we need to always be absolutely confident that if we're not talking to children about difficult things that have happened to them, it's for the right reasons and not because we can't bear it for ourselves.
Yes.
So it's one of the reasons why when I'm training social workers and therapists to do this kind of work, I always ask them to centre the foster carer as expert in their child and to involve them in the thinking and the planning and the execution of the work, because they're often going to be your shortcut to safety. They're the ones that know how their child will respond when they're feeling under threat or they're feeling a bit anxious. They're the ones that will be able to interpret all the nonverbal communication. They're the ones that are there in between the sessions to continue having conversations. But it's also about making sure before anything is shared with the child that the carer has access to full information about their child as well. Because then they've got an opportunity to then think about, what does this mean for me? How do I feel about this child's experiences? And to almost put their own mask on first. You know, like you say, when people are flying, you're flying with children, put your own mask on first. We need carers to be able to do that, because, you know, some of the experiences the children that we care for and work with have had are so unimaginable. They're so difficult that it's hard to get your head round.
Yeah.
And as a caregiver, you need to have got your head round that if you are then going to be able to be available for co-regulation for your child. Whereas if you're still caught up in the emotional experience of it yourself, because it's really distressing, you can't be available for that child in the way that they're going to need, because your own needs might overwhelm you. That's normal, isn't it? We're all human beings at the end of the day. And
we might be signaling to a child as well along the way that I can't deal with this.
Can't cope with it.
I can't cope with it, which makes it that bit scarier for the child then maybe too.
Scarier for the child, but also I think, you know, I've worked with a lot of young people, especially in adolescence and young adulthood, who have really, really worried that if I or their carer knows what what they might have been involved in or what they might have done, that our view of them will shift and it will be catastrophic for the relationship, because they'll be judged and they will tip straight into shame then. And that is the opposite of what we want. We want children and young people to feel like we are robust enough to tolerate whatever comes our way, that our view of that child is never going to change because we know something different about them. Our caregiving might be different, might it? I'll give you a quick example of a little one I worked with when she was little, and she was really little, maybe about 6. And I worked with her non-directively doing art therapy at 6. And then fast forward a few years, she was still with the same carer. She'd been with that carer since she was 5 when she came into care. And fast forward to 11, and she was making the transition to secondary education, and her carer felt that actually she was ready for the sort of next stages of the work, really, that needed to be a bit more verbal and a bit more insight orientated, I suppose, and just thinking a bit more directly about her experiences and helping her make sense of that. And so I went and read her files, which I hadn't done the first time around. The first time I'd just worked with what was on my referral form. The second time I went back and read everything, and I realised when I read the files that this little one had made a disclosure that she'd been sexually abused before she came into care. And she'd told her mummy, and the police had been involved. She'd had a child protection medical, a police interview. You know, it was a big deal. I hadn't known that when I worked with her the first time. And I felt incredibly guilty that I'd not known it, actually, because I thought, how might I have understood this child differently had I known that in therapy? But I was also pretty certain that her foster carer didn't know either, because I think if she'd have known, she'd have told me.
Yeah.
And so when I went, I kind of got the chronology together, and I went and met with her, and I said, I've found something in this file that I think I'm worried you don't know it. And it's difficult. it's difficult to think about. And by this point, she's looked after this little girl for 6 years.
Oh my God.
For longer than she'd lived with her birth mum. And she cared about her deeply. And I thought, I anticipated 2 things might happen. One, that she might be really upset, and she was. Upset that this had happened to this child, really, who she loved. And then the other bit I anticipated might happen was a sense of guilt that had she known that this had been an experience for her child, the way that she parented her might have looked different. You know, she'd have been more mindful of certain things, or she might have given her opportunity to talk about it, you know, which this kid had not had because none of us had known. We hadn't known.
Yeah.
So again, when you don't talk about things that may feel shameful, what message are you giving to that child? You're giving a message that it is shameful, and that's why none of us can bear thinking or talking about it. So I anticipated those 2 things. Those things did happen, and this foster carer had a good old cry, actually. She was really upset, also really angry, you know, those kind of angry tears.
Yeah.
Because you're just thinking, why has nobody told me this? In all this time, I've not given this child a chance to talk about that. I've not adapted my caregiving. Knowing that she's had that experience of unsafe touch, I've not given her a chance to talk about it. Or she was furious, but also just really upset for the child. Now, if she'd have learned that in the session at the same time as I'm telling the child, how on earth could you expect her to be regulated enough and not shocked by the information to be able to be alongside that child and support her and nurture her and help it feel okay?
Yeah.
Not reasonable, is it, to ask?
No, it's too much for anybody. And it really points back to the need for foster carers having all the information that's available.
Yeah. So important, isn't it, that we do that? And I get that we have to be careful with people's information, and that you don't want just every person in that child's life knowing every detail of their history. That's not appropriate. But if you're caring for a child in your family and you want to best meet their needs, you need to understand what's gone before, don't you? And in order to provide the right kind of care for that child, but also to be able to give that child opportunities to think and talk about what they've experienced. You've got to understand it yourself. Not all children will bring it, will they? Some will ask very overt questions, and where they are asking overt questions, we need to really support carers to feel confident in responding in the moment. But not all kids do that, do they? Some don't know it's okay to do that. Some don't have a verbal memory of what's happened to them, so they can't talk about it, but you might see it being represented in different ways through behaviour or how they feel and act around certain things. But yeah, they've got to know, haven't they?
Yeah, you would wonder why they can't know. It feels so basic to equip them to take care of the child. Katie, you've been a foster carer yourself as well.
Yeah.
And so when this question that I posed to you around what foster carers need, that's coming from your own lived experience as well as coming from social work.
Well, I think I probably must have been one of the least popular foster carers in the history of that local authority, because when I was approached to think about having a child come to our family for short breaks, I asked a lot of questions. And I could tell by the responses from the social workers, they were not used to that degree of curiosity, or not challenge, but I suppose it was challenge in a way, because at the time that we started fostering, my son was only 3. We later had another child, so I had a newborn baby at times when we were fostering, and I needed to understand what the needs of those children were and whether those needs could be accommodated within our family system at that time. As time went on, I think what I would have really valued a lot more would have been if we had been, and it was a bit different for us because we were short breaks carers. We were supporting often kinship carers who were caring for family members and giving them a break. So it's a bit different for us. But one of the things I think about a lot now for the parents and carers we work with in BUS and also in Life Story work is treating caregivers as experts in their children. You know, not making and not having professionals meetings and not including the carer, not taking that carer's view as seriously as you might take a therapist's view or a social worker's view, that makes me really cross. Actually, we never used to be invited to the child's reviews as short breaks carers, which I always thought was just random. Why not? We're part of their life. Some of those children we looked after for 5, 6, 7, 8 years.
Yeah.
Why were we not included in those systems? Why were we not included in the thinking? So I think more and more as the years go on, my thinking about this gets stronger and stronger. And that is treat parents or adoptive parents, foster carers as experts in their children and see them as the key agents of change, whatever you're doing. Because they're the ones that are with those children day in, day out. I might see them once a fortnight. Social worker might see them once every 6 weeks. We are never going to be as important in helping those children recover from their early experiences as their caregivers are. So I think that's the other bit. Carers need to be treated with respect, really, and treated as members of that professional system around the child and listened to. The other couple of things I put were about, I suppose this is what I didn't have when I started caring for traumatized kids, is support to really understand. I think in fostering training, in your prep groups and stuff, you have input, don't you, around the impact of trauma, developmental trauma on the child, impact of trauma, potentially on yourself. But I think I hear over and over that is great when it's just the theory, but actually in the moment, you then need help to think about how does that theory relate to this particular child and their presentation, and what do I do about it? In my old team, we used to run, it was called the fostering surgery, and it was a service that we ran for foster carers and kinship carers and special guardians, where they could just ring up our team and book in to chat with one of the therapeutic social workers about any issue that was kind of on their minds, I guess. And what we absolutely, and without having to wait for a referral through the social worker, and they could come up to 3 times to have a chat with us. Usually around behavioural stuff, really, and how do I manage this or what do I do? And what we learned very quickly in those sessions was we needed to do a number of things. One was to support them to understand the theory behind what they were seeing. So really to understand the why. But understanding the why isn't enough. What they then wanted was, and so what do I do about it? What do I do then? Yeah, so, okay, I understand that's about developmental trauma. That's about being in a fight mode, state of mind, or that's about, okay, I understand that now. Now, what do I practically do? Because understanding the theory without the practical application of it isn't that useful, is it? It's just not. The third thing that we realised they needed was a bit of care, a bit of validation for the struggles they might be having, for some of the challenges that they were facing, and to have a bit of someone having confidence in their capacity to manage those struggles, to be alongside their child as the expert in their child, to be able to move through that difficult time. So 3 things. They were the 3 things that we found seemed to be like the magic combination, really. Why? What do I do then? And also just that bit of validation about and support to manage their own feelings and understand their own triggers. Magic formula.
You're listening to the Stories from Foster Care podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Of course, we come across this all the time in IFCA as well.
Yeah, I bet.
And there's sort of this gap as well. Why can't it be so? Why can't this be resourced to be the reality? And I guess we're all doing what we can to put some of those things in place without maybe the resources that we all need sometimes,
Absolutely. So frustrating, isn't it?
Yeah, to be able to see what you've just outlined.
And I think one of the reasons we set that little service up was because we were hearing how frustrated carers were when they were saying, I'm finding this really difficult, or my child is really struggling with X, Y, or Z. And then the people who were responsible for getting help for them, the social workers, then weren't acting on that quickly enough. So our plan was, if we can offer a bit of quick thinking before things reach crisis point, surely that's a sensible thing to do rather than, them waiting for the social worker to make a referral, then waiting for us to have a practitioner to allocate someone to work with you. And that would take months. Whereas actually some of this stuff could be supported really quickly and easily.
Yeah.
Just in 2 or 3 sessions. And then you've averted the crisis, haven't you? Because you've responded in a timely way to somebody's anxiety or somebody's curiosity or somebody's frustration or just impotence in thinking, I don't know what to do. I've tried this, I've tried that. It doesn't work. What? Anyone else got any other ideas? And just creating that little collaborative thinking space.
Yes.
Was so helpful, honestly. It's still, that's still running now. And there was a time when anyone who worked in the team would have provided that support for carers. And what I quickly realised is that actually it was quite a specialist role for the therapeutic social worker, actually, because you needed to kind of be willing to think with families about whatever came up in the session. And you'd have a bit of a rough outline, a couple of lines about what the carer wanted to think and talk about. But then, as you know, you end up going off in all sorts of tangents. So it was best suited, that service, to a practitioner who was really good at thinking on the feet, but also in being confident in not knowing. In saying, you know what, that is really tricky. Let's just try and unpick it a bit together and see if we can come to a solution rather than holding this I'm the expert position. Because we're not, are we? We bring what we know, and we should bring, this is, what we do in the bus team all the time. We'll bring the knowledge that we have about whatever issue, and that carer or adopted parent brings what they know about their child and what they understand about the situation. And you bring those 2 things together, and you come up with a hypothesis, or you come up with some possible solutions, or you come up with some places to start. But you do that in collaboration with the carer, not sitting here as the expert instructing them what to do. Because I think that's quite disrespectful, actually. It needs to be both things, doesn't it? I know what I know. You know what you know. Let's bring those 2 things together and try to come up with something that feels helpful for you and the child.
Yeah, it has to be relational, doesn't it? And
of course it does.
Not at a remove. Katie, we're coming towards the end of our time, which I'm kind of dismayed to realise, because I feel like there's so much more to talk about. Is there anything that you haven't touched on that you would like to bring forward? We haven't spoken about bus at all yet.
Oh, we haven't much, have we?
No, we've referenced it. Yeah, if you'd like to tell people what bus is, I mean, we do offer different trainings in it, but maybe not everyone knows about it.
We do, and also there's all sorts of little bus groups happening in schools, and we're doing a lot of work with children in foster care in groups in Ireland at the moment. So it may be that some of your carers get to hear a little bit about us, and that would be fabulous. So BUS, as you said, stands for, I think you might have said this at the beginning, stands for Building Underdeveloped Sensorimotor Systems, and it's a model that really focuses on building bodily regulation. So think about developmental kind of triangle, what's at the bottom of that pyramid, it's bodily regulation. So we're really used to thinking, just as we have been doing for this whole session, about psychological impact of experiencing disruption to development. But I certainly, earlier in my career, didn't have a clue about what impact that might have had on bodily regulation. And so BUS is kind of designed to plug that little gap. And what we try to look for is, where are the earliest developmental gaps in terms of movement, touch, and relationships? What has that child not had? So it might be, for example, that if in utero they've been exposed to drugs or alcohol or high maternal stress, that will have affected how that baby moves. Babies don't move when they're scared or sozzled in alcohol in the same way. And so even before birth, their foundation systems are underdeveloped. They'll need more than good enough care. Similarly, if children don't have opportunities for being held in safe arms and rocked and carried, they don't learn that it's safe to be off the ground. And if they don't have lots of opportunities for lying on their tummy or for crawling or commando crawling because they're stuck in a car seat or left in a buggy or put in front of a TV, then again, they don't build the core strength and stability. They might need to be able to walk in a nice coordinated way, or sit on the bottom at the table, or, control a pencil. Anything that happens at the extremities is much harder to control. So, fine motor control is impacted. So it's just huge. And if you're not well regulated on a bodily level, that's going to have an impact on your emotion regulation. Kids might not have much stamina, or they might whiz and crash and bang around because they're trying to get the input they need from outside their body. Really, they should be getting from the inside. So bus is the things I love about bus, I'll just finish with this, are, number one, it centres the parent or the carer as the main agent of change. So it's about trying to think with families about how they can fill in some of these touch, movement and relational gaps for their child. Because the movement gaps are one thing, but actually, when you're supporting a baby to learn to sit or to have tummy time or to crawl, usually that's done in the context of a relationship with someone who really cares about you, that's cheerleading for you, that's putting that toy just out of reach and then celebrating when you reach out for it. It's all that is just as important as the actual movement is. So the right people to do that are the child's carers. So that's one thing I love about it, that you're not having to introduce a child to somebody new and to another therapist. These are just games and activities you'll play with your foster carer. That's one thing I love. The other thing I love is that it's hopeful, in that we're not saying that anything's broken about these little bodies. What we're saying is there's been a disruption to your development. So that doesn't mean that there's something that's disordered or broken. It just means you've not had what you needed when you needed it. So let's go back and fill those gaps in. It's hopeful. It's also quick. If we can support children and their carers to play the games, do the activities on a regular basis, so, weaving them into daily life, you'll see change quickly. And that, again, is so motivating, isn't it? You're much more likely to do something if you can get the little quick win. So that's the other thing that I really love about it. BUS generally is about 4 months, the intervention from start to finish. And if by that midway point, we've really supported families to integrate the games and activities into daily life, we'd be shocked if you weren't already seeing something looking and feeling different. And as someone whose, main therapeutic modality is psychotherapy, art psychotherapy, nothing happens quickly in art psychotherapy. It's a long intervention. So for me, knowing that here's something that you can do at home without having to introduce somebody new that can have a quick impact is really good fun. Builds bodily regulation, but at the same time is building a relationship and emotion regulation in that child. And meaning they're not having to use up all their good energy for sitting or walking or running. That frees up all sorts of good energy for the things that are much more important, like playing and learning and making friends and, being able to be in your family. They're my favourite things about it. And in Ireland at the moment, there are a number of preschool groups running, which we call leaflets. So they are groups that we developed when I worked in the therapeutic social work team. Sarah Lloyd, who developed BUS, was seconded into our team for a little while. And we developed an offer for children in foster care in Leeds ideally in the year before they started school. And that was in collaboration with the virtual school, who were responsible for the education of children in care, in recognition of the fact that so many of our looked after children were starting school so far from being school ready, it was untrue. And therefore were failing very quickly. Were being excluded or on part-time timetables within the first term. So we were not setting them up for success. So Leaflets was a group that was developed to work with those children. And there are lots of those groups running in Ireland. I have been over the last year, and that work's been evaluated by independent researchers at University College Dublin, doing that research in collaboration with IFCA, aren't they? You got the funding for it. So that's been running. And we were also running a whole school project in Dublin as well, at St Joseph's, looking at much more of an integration of BUS into the whole school, into the curriculum, just as we have done in Leeds and in Bradford, actually. So but the difference, I guess, in Ireland is that in the English schools, we've had somebody in the school a day a week doing the work alongside, whereas, we can't be nipping, as much as we'd love to nip to Dublin every week, we can't practically do that. So Sarah and a colleague, Suzanne, who's a trained teacher, come over to Dublin for little blocks of time, spend time in the school and have supervision in between, and that is also happening. So it may be that your carers start to hear, especially carers of littlies, might get to hear maybe a bit more about leaflets than you might about bus. But we've also got practitioners over in Ireland who have trained with us to run the groups. We've got another person who's almost finished her practicum and will be an accredited bus practitioner and offering individual interventions to children in Ireland. So that's a really exciting kind of development, really. We've really enjoyed working with IFCA. Well, you've made it happen, really. You know, a lot of that work, the leaflets, the rollout of leaflets would not have happened if it weren't for IFCA getting the funding for it. So that's been a real, challenging because we're not local and we can't pop in and help you, but also I think really, really impactful. We'll look forward to seeing the outcomes of those groups.
Yes, and it continues to evolve here. It's going to be you're going to be an offering in our conference as well, and it sounds like just such a wonderful model. So it's a great fit.
It would have taken something pretty spectacular to make me leave my old team after 18 years. You know, it was a beautiful team to work in. I'd worked really hard to shape it to be what I felt was the right thing for children and families in Leeds. A very secure job within a local authority, and to leave that to set up the bus team with Sarah in 2020 in the middle of a pandemic, when we had no idea where things would go and whether it would be a success or not. Honestly, it had to be something pretty spectacular to lure me away from that job security. And I'm so glad of that. I'm so glad that I did it.
Well, that is a wonderful recommendation for that intervention, that program with all your experience, and congratulations so far on how it's been going. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's great. It's been just brilliant to see how it's grown.
Yeah.
And the evidence base growing around it as well, which has been a huge priority for us in the last few years. Yeah.
Sure. As we come just about to the end, Katie, is there anything you would like to add that feels important to say? I mean, we could do, 3 podcast episodes with you.
I was going to say, I think you probably heard enough of me.
No, not at all. If there's anything else you would like to say, we'd love to hear it.
No, I don't think so. I think that's everything that was on my list of things that I would have loved to talk about. I think you've given me the space to do that. And, it's been lovely to have, the relationship I've had with IFCA over the years, from first coming over to your conference and writing things for your journal and, being part of this. It's lovely to have those kind of longer term relationships, isn't it? And
absolutely. We're very grateful, and it's just great to check in with you every once in a while. So hopefully we can continue to do that. And honestly, thank you for sharing all your expertise and your life experience. And it's really, really generous of you. So thanks a million. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks for inviting me.
That was a really interesting conversation with Katie. Hopefully we'll have her back again. There's so much to talk about with her. In the meantime, you can check out her books and her websites for her work, and we'll post links to these on the episode page. Thanks for listening.